Alara stood at the edge of the grand terrace of the Boston Heritage Hotel, carefully arranging the white orchids by touch, when Tristan Vance, the billionaire owner's son, shoved her hard into the freezing mud of the newly turned garden beds. He called her a worthless blind charity case in front of the city's entire elite high society, laughing as her uniform soaked through with dirt. They had absolutely no idea that beneath her stained collar rested the heavy gold signet of the House of Valerius, or that the true queen of their allied nation was currently bleeding into the Boston soil. What happens next will change everything. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. If you love stories about explosive karma, secret identities, and seeing cruel people get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. To understand the magnitude of what happened that night on the terrace, you have to understand the quiet, invisible life of Alara. For 22 years, Alara's world had been defined not by light and shadow, but by texture, sound, and the sharp, undeniable truth of how people treat those they believe are beneath them. Alara was completely blind. She had lost her sight at the age of 6 in a horrific, fiery car crash on a winding mountain road in Europe, a crash that had claimed the lives of her parents. Since that night, her life had been a series of foster homes, charity wards, and finally a grueling position as a floral assistant at the Boston Heritage Hotel. She was an orphan, a girl with no last name on her employee badge, known only as the quiet, graceful worker who could arrange a perfect bouquet by the mere scent and velvet touch of the petals. She lived in a tiny, drafty room above the hotel's laundry facilities, waking every morning at 4 to the rhythmic thrumming of the industrial washing machines beneath her floorboards. Her days were a symphony of sensory inputs: the crisp rustle of eucalyptus leaves, the damp, earthy smell of potting soil, the sharp sting of rose thorns, and the biting chill of the Boston winter seeping through the loading dock doors. But despite the harshness of her reality, Alara possessed a core trait that baffled those around her: an unbreakable, quiet dignity. She never complained. She never raised her voice. When the kitchen staff yelled, she simply nodded. When the hotel guests dismissed her as invisible, she offered a polite, serene smile. But Alara was holding onto a secret so massive, so dangerous, that it dictated every breath she took. Hidden beneath her scratchy, oversized gray uniform, resting flat against her collarbone, was a heavy, ancient locket. Inside that locket was a seal, a soaring eagle clashing with a crown forged in pure, heavy gold. It was the crest of the Kingdom of Valerius, a sovereign, wealthy European nation. The crash that took her parents and her sight had not been an accident. It had been an assassination. Her parents were the king and queen, and she, Ilarii, was the sole surviving heir. She had hidden her identity for a reason. After the crash, she had been smuggled to America by a loyal guard who passed away shortly after, leaving her entirely alone in the system. As she grew older, her memories of crystal chandeliers and marble floors faded, replaced by the instinct to survive. She stayed hidden because she knew the political enemies who took her family's lives were still searching for the lost princess. But more than that, as she entered adulthood, a deeper motivation took root in her heart. She wanted to be loved, valued, and respected for who she was in the dark, not for a crown she could not even see. She wanted to know the true nature of the world, and the world she was learning could be incredibly cruel. This cruelty was perfectly embodied by Tristan Vance. Tristan was the 24-year-old son of the hotel's owner. He was a classist gatekeeper of the highest order, a young man who judged the worth of every human being by the brand of their shoes, the cut of their suit, and the weight of their family name. He had a reputation in Boston's high society as a golden boy, but to the staff of the Heritage Hotel, he was a nightmare. Tristan's method of asserting dominance was public humiliation. He thrived on the power dynamic, on reminding the help that they were replaceable. And for some reason, Ilara's quiet dignity infuriated him. He couldn't stand that a blind, orphaned florist did not cower in his presence. Um, the inciting incident of our story began on a crisp Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks before the hotel's annual winter charity gala. Ilara was in the grand lobby, carefully tracing the edges of a massive floral centerpiece to ensure the lilies were perfectly symmetrical. Tristan was holding court with a group of wealthy investors near the elevators. "Watch this," Ilara heard Tristan say, his voice a smooth, venomous drawl that always smelled faintly of expensive cologne and stale scotch. Footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. "You!" Tristan barked. Ilara paused, her hands hovering over a delicate fern. She turned her face toward the sound of his voice, keeping her posture perfectly straight. "Yes, Mr. Vance? You've arranged these entirely wrong," he lied loudly, ensuring the investors could hear. "Half of these are dead. Are you completely useless or just milking your disability so my father won't fire you out of pity?" The silence in the lobby was immediate and suffocating. Ilara could feel the heat of a dozen stares burning into her skin. Her flaw had always been hiding the truth for too long, enabling this kind of cruelty, but her defense mechanism was flawless grace. "I apologize if the arrangement displeases you, sir," Ilara said, her voice steady, melodic, and completely devoid of anger. "I will replace the stems immediately." "You'll replace them because I tell you to," Tristan sneered, stepping closer. He deliberately knocked his elbow into the crystal vase. It shattered on the marble floor with a deafening crash, water and shattered glass splashing onto Ilara's worn shoes. "Clean it up and try not to cut yourself. Liability is expensive." As Tristan walked away, laughing with his friends, Ilara knelt on the cold floor, her fingers carefully navigating the dangerous shards. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, she simply gathered the broken pieces, her dignity perfectly intact. If you've ever been mocked, underestimated, or humiliated for something you couldn't control, drop a comment below. You are not alone. Ilara endured the humiliation with a grace that baffled the rest of the staff. As she knelt in the water, another set of footsteps approached. These were different, lighter, hesitant, lacking the arrogant weight of Tristan's stride. "Stop! Please let me help you," a warm, gentle voice said. Ilara felt a hand gently grasp her wrist, pulling her fingers away from a sharp shard of crystal she hadn't sensed. It was Julian, the hotel's resident pianist. Julian was a quiet, observant man, a brilliant musician who often played late into the night when the lobby was empty. He had a habit of describing the colors of the sky to Ilara when they took their breaks on the loading dock. He saw Ilara's worth long before he knew anything of crowns or kingdoms. "You shouldn't be doing this," Julian whispered fiercely, sweeping the glass into a pan. "He's a monster, Ilara. Why do you let him speak to you that way?" "Because words only have the power you give them, Julian," Ilara replied softly, standing up and smoothing her damp apron. "Tristan Vance is a man who relies on the fear of others to feel tall. I am not afraid of him, therefore he is very small." Julian looked at her, his heart aching at the profound strength radiating from this fragile-looking girl. He reached into his pocket and handed her a clean handkerchief. "You are worth 100 of him, Ilara. Someday the rest of the world is going to see that." Ilara smiled, her fingers brushing the heavy chain of the locket beneath her shirt. Someday she thought might be sooner than anyone realizes. Over the next 2 weeks, the tension in the hotel skyrocketed as preparations for the winter charity gala consumed every hour. It was the most exclusive black tie event in Boston, a gathering of the city's wealthiest and most powerful families. Tristan was determined to use the event to announce his promotion to vice president of his father's company. He was high on stress and power, and he doubled down on his cruelty toward the staff. With Ilara as his favorite target, he made her work double shifts in the freezing floral coolers. He intentionally gave her the wrong measurements for the dining tables, forcing her to redo hours of work. Through it all, Ilara remained a fortress of calm. Her internal conflict, however, was reaching a boiling point. Recently, her sharpened hearing had picked up snippets of news on the hotel kitchen's television. The kingdom of Valerius was in turmoil. The political faction that had usurped the throne was crumbling. The loyalist forces, led by her father's brother, Duke Harrison, had taken back control of the capital. The news anchors spoke of a massive international manhunt for the lost heir, Princess Ilara. She knew she had to reveal herself. She knew her country needed her. But stepping out of the shadows meant stepping into a target. It meant leaving the quiet, humble life she had built. It meant leaving Julian, who sat with her in the evenings, playing soft melodies that made her dark world feel incredibly vibrant and colorful. The night of the gala arrived. The Boston Heritage Hotel was transformed into a glittering palace of ice and silver. Ilara, though technically off the clock, was ordered by Tristan to stand near the terrace doors in her drab gray uniform, holding a tray of extra champagne flutes. He wanted her there as a visual contrast to his wealthy guests, and a prop to make the elite feel even more elevated. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfumes, roasted duck, and the sharp fizz of champagne. The string quartet was playing a lively waltz. Ilara stood perfectly still, a silent observer in a world she was barred from participating in. Julian, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo for his performance later, managed to slip away from the ballroom and found her by the terrace. "You look exhausted," he murmured, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I'm fine, Julian," she said, though her arms ached from holding the heavy silver tray. "I brought you this," he said, slipping a warm, soft roll from the kitchen into her apron pocket. "You haven't eaten since this morning." Ilara's heart fluttered. This was the true magic of the world, not the gold in her locket, but the quiet, inconvenient kindness of someone who cared. "Thank you," she whispered, but their moment was shattered by the harsh bark of a laugh. Tristan Vance pushed through the terrace doors, flanked by a group of prominent social rivals, including the daughter of a major tech CEO whom Tristan was desperately trying to impress. Tristan was drunk on expensive scotch and his own ego. He saw Ilara and Julian whispering, and a cruel, malicious light danced in his eyes. "Well, well, look at this," Tristan sneered, his voice cutting through the elegant music. The guests nearby turned to watch. The blind charity case and the glorified jukebox fraternizing on company time? Julian stepped in front of Ilara, his jaw clenched. "Leave her alone, Tristan. She's just doing her job." "Her job is to be unseen unless required," Tristan snapped, stepping aggressively into Julian's space. "And your job is to play the piano, not coddle the disabled help." Tristan turned his full venomous attention back to Ilara. "You know, Ilara, I've always wondered, since you can't see the dirt you live in, do you just pretend you're actually someone important? Do you sit in your miserable little room and pretend you belong with people like us?" "I don't pretend anything, Mr. Vance," Ilara said, her voice carrying a regal, icy calm that silenced the immediate crowd. "I know exactly who I am. And I know exactly what my worth is. It is not measured by the clothes I wear or the money in a bank account. Tristan's face flushed with fury. How dare she? Dare! How dare this ragged, blind orphan speak to him with such authority in front of the very people he was trying to impress? His fatal flaw, his absolute reliance on surface signals to determine a person's value, blinded him to the monumental mistake he was about to make of your worth? Tristan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Your worth is less than the dirt on my shoes. He reached out and deliberately, forcefully shoved Alara's shoulder. Caught off guard, her feet tangled. She stumbled backward through the open terrace doors. The heavy silver tray clattered to the stone floor, champagne glasses shattering into 1,000 pieces. Ilara lost her footing completely and fell backward, tumbling off the low stone step and crashing directly into the freezing, freshly watered mud of the decorative winter garden. Gasps echoed from the crowd. The music inside stuttered to a halt. Ilara lay in the freezing mud, the cold seeping instantly through her thin uniform, chilling her to the bone. Her hands were scraped, and her hair, usually neatly pinned, fell in a muddy tangle across her face. Tristan stood over her, a cruel, victorious smirk on his face. Clean her up and get her out of my sight, he ordered the frozen security guards. She's fired. Julian dropped to his knees in the mud beside her, his tuxedo instantly ruined, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. Ilara? Ilara, are you okay? If you're loving this story so far and your blood is boiling at Tristan's cruelty, do not go anywhere. This is exactly where it gets good. Subscribe now because what happens next is legendary. Ilara did not cry. She did not scream. She slowly sat up in the mud, Julian supporting her back. She took a deep, steadying breath. The time for hiding was over. She reached up with trembling, mud-stained fingers and gripped the collar of her uniform. With a sharp tug, she ripped the top button, pulling the heavy gold locket out from beneath her shirt. It gleamed under the terrace lights, an undeniable, blinding contrast to the dirt she sat in. She unclasped it, revealing the massive, unmistakable crest of the Valerian royals. But before anyone in the crowd could even process the heavy gold artifact in the mud-soaked girl's hand, a sound began to build in the distance. It started as a low vibration, a deep, rhythmic thrumming that rattled the champagne flutes left on the tables, the sound of distant engines, powerful and uniform, growing louder by the second. The crowd on the terrace murmured, turning their attention toward the front of the hotel. Tristan frowned, stepping away from the garden edge. What is that? The sound escalated into a roar. Tires screeched against the pavement of the hotel's grand circular driveway. The guests rushed to the glass balustrades to look down. Pulling up to the entrance of the Boston Heritage Hotel were not just cars. It was a fleet. 6 massive, heavily armored black SUVs, their windows tinted pitch black, the hoods adorned with the fluttering gold-embroidered flags of the sovereign nation of Valerius. The silence that fell over the gala was absolute. No one breathed. The Valerian Royal Guard, whispered a wealthy politician in the crowd, his face draining of color. What are they doing here? Tristan's chest puffed out. His ego immediately hijacked his logic. They must be here for me, he announced loudly to the crowd, straightening his designer jacket. My father was negotiating a hotel deal in their capital. They must have heard about my promotion. The doors of the SUVs swung open in unison. Out stepped 24 men and women clad in immaculate ceremonial uniforms, deep navy blue wool, heavy with braided gold cord across their chests, swords strapped to their hips, and polished boots that moved with terrifying synchronized precision. They fanned out, securing the perimeter of the lobby below, their faces carved from stone. From the lead SUV stepped a man of imposing height and age, wearing a sash of deep crimson over a chest full of military medals. It was Duke Harrison, commander of the Valerian Kingsguard, and Alara's uncle. The hotel security parted like water. The Duke did not pause at the front desk. He did not look at the glittering chandeliers. He marched directly toward the grand staircase leading to the terrace, his guards flanking him in a perfect, impenetrable V formation. Tristan hurried to the top of the stairs, pasting on his most charming, arrogant smile. He held out his hand. "Commander, welcome to the Boston Heritage. I am Tristan Vance, The Duke did not even blink. He didn't break his stride. He walked straight past Tristan, his armored shoulder catching the young billionaire and spinning him aside like he was nothing more than an inconvenient piece of furniture. Tristan stumbled, his jaw dropping in shock. The crowd parted violently, pressing themselves against the walls to make way for the imposing military force. Duke Harrison walked out onto the terrace. He stopped at the edge of the garden. His steely eyes scanned the scene, taking in the shattered glass, the horrified elites, and finally the young, blind woman sitting in the freezing mud, clutching the gold seal of his family. A collective gasp rippled through the high society guests as the commander of the Kingsguard, a man who bowed only to a reigning monarch, stepped directly into the mud, ignoring the ruin of his pristine boots. He stopped in front of Alara. Slowly, reverently, he lowered himself onto one knee, bowing his head deeply. In flawless synchronization, the 24 royal guards behind him drew their ceremonial swords with a sharp shk of steel, drove the points into the stone floor, and dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty," Duke Harrison's voice boomed across the silent terrace, thick with emotion and absolute authority. "The usurpers have fallen. The throne is secure. It has taken us 16 years, but we have finally found you." The words landed like a physical blow on the crowd. People staggered backward. Tristan's face went completely, terrifyingly white. The glass of scotch slipped from his limp fingers, shattering on the ground. "Majesty," he stammered, his voice cracking. That's impossible. She's a blind orphan. She arranges flowers. She's nobody." Duke Harrison stood slowly. He turned his head, his eyes locking onto Tristan with the cold, lethal intent of a predator. He gestured to one of his guards. "Herald." A guard stepped forward, unrolling a heavy parchment. His voice echoed like thunder across the Boston night. "Presenting Her Royal Highness, Queen Alara Valerius I, sovereign ruler of the Kingdom of Athelgard, protector of the realm, and sole heir to the Valerian throne." Alara placed her muddy hand into her uncle's gloved one. With his help, and with Julian still holding her other arm, she stood up. She did not wipe the mud from her face. She did not try to hide the stains on her uniform. She stood with a spine made of steel, the true, undeniable aura of a queen radiating from her small frame. She turned her blind, unseeing eyes precisely toward the direction of Tristan's stammering voice. Tristan was hyperventilating. His entire worldview, his entire social standing was collapsing in real time. The tech CEO's daughter, whom he had been trying to impress, looked at him with utter disgust and physically backed away. The investors who had watched him mock Alara in the lobby were already pulling out their phones, frantically calling their brokers to sever ties with the Vance family. "Alara, Your Majesty," Tristan stuttered, taking a desperate step forward, his hands raised in a pathetic attempt at reconciliation. "I had no idea. If I had known who you were, I never would have—" "Stop," Alara said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a diamond blade. The silence that followed was absolute. "You didn't want to know," Alara said, her tone perfectly measured, devastatingly calm. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. You chose cruelty when kindness cost you absolutely nothing. You looked at a person who had less than you and you decided that made them less than human. Please, Tristan begged, his voice high and thin, completely stripped of its former arrogance. My father's business, our reputation, please have mercy. These are simply consequences, Tristan, Alara replied, her face a mask of cold dignity. You revealed exactly who you are to this room. Worth isn't measured in stock portfolios or the clothes on your back. It is measured in how you treat the vulnerable. And you, Mr. Vance, are bankrupt. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't seek petty revenge. She simply stated the undeniable truth and dismissed him entirely. Alara turned slightly toward the man who still held her arm. Julian. Julian looked at her, wide-eyed, mud smeared across his tuxedo trousers. Yes, Alara. Will you accompany me home? It seems I am in need of a new head of cultural affairs, and I would very much like to hear you play on a proper grand piano. Julian's shock melted into a slow, warm smile. It would be the honor of my life, Your Majesty. Alara took Julian's arm on her left and Duke Harrison's arm on her right. Without another word, without looking back at the ruin of Tristan Vance, the true queen walked through the parted crowd of Boston's elite, leaving them choking on their own judgment. 3 years later, the sun warmed the massive stone balconies of the royal palace of Valerius. The air smelled of blooming jasmine and sea salt. Alara stood by the marble balustrade, wearing a simple but exquisitely tailored gown of deep sapphire blue. Her blindness remained, but the palace had been quietly modified. Textures on the walls, subtle chimes at the doorways, allowing her to navigate her kingdom with total independence and grace. She was beloved by her people. She ruled with a profound, unshakable empathy, having known what it meant to be the lowest, the most ignored, and the most vulnerable. Footsteps approached, light, familiar, bringing a smile to her face before he even spoke. Julian wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They had been married the previous spring in a ceremony that shut down the entire capital for 3 days. The council meeting went well? He asked softly. It did, Alara murmured, leaning back into his warmth, though they still argued too much over the agricultural budget. I have some news from Boston, Julian said, his tone carefully neutral. Alara paused. Go on? The Heritage Hotel went into foreclosure yesterday after the incident at the gala. The Vance family lost their international contracts. No one wanted to do business with them. Tristan was last seen working as a junior clerk in a shipping warehouse, complaining to anyone who would listen that he used to be royalty. Alara felt no triumph, only a quiet, settling peace. She didn't gloat. The universe had simply balanced its scales. I hope he learns, she said softly. I hope he learns how to be human. Julian kissed her cheek. He might, but you already knew how, even in the dark. Trust me, you won't believe how often this happens in real life. Worth exists independent of recognition. The right person, the right people will see your value long before they know your status, your bank account, or your title. True victory is not found in screaming revenge at those who hurt you. True victory is living well, holding your head high, and watching as the cruelty of others inevitably becomes their own undoing. Cruelty always reveals the perpetrator, not the victim. Would you have chosen mercy, or would you have destroyed his life completely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.